The rain pounded against the pavement like 1,000 angry fists, each drop exploding into tiny nebulae of water that soaked through the thin fabric of my worn-out sneakers. I pulled my jacket tighter around my shoulders, though it did little to keep the October chill from seeping into my bones. The bus stop offered minimal shelter, its plastic awning punctured with holes that leaked steadily onto my already damp hair. Tuesday evenings were always the worst. After 14 hours of scrubbing other people's toilets, dusting their expensive trinkets, and polishing silver I would never own, my body felt like it had been wrung out and hung to dry. The Morrison family had been particularly demanding today. A dinner party for 12 meant extra everything. Extra floors to mop, extra bathrooms to clean, extra judgment from women whose diamond earrings probably cost more than I made in 3 months. I checked my watch. 9:47 p.m. The last bus would arrive in 13 minutes, assuming it wasn't running late again. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the empty street in a brief flash of electric blue. In that moment of clarity, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small figure huddled against the brick wall of the alleyway across the street. At first, I thought it might be a pile of discarded clothes, or maybe a stray dog seeking shelter. But then a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the alley entrance, and I caught a glimpse of a little boy's face, streaked with tears and rain. "Hey!" I called out, but my voice was swallowed by a roll of thunder. I hesitated for only a moment. My apartment was a 40-minute bus ride away, and I had to be up at 4 a.m. for my morning shift at the Donovan estate. But I couldn't just leave a child alone in this weather, in this neighborhood. Westwood Hills might look pristine and safe with its manicured lawns and security patrols, but I'd heard enough stories from the other maids to know better. I darted across the empty street, my feet splashing through puddles until I reached the entrance to the alley. The boy flinched when he saw me approaching, pressing himself tighter against the wall. "Hi there," I said, keeping my voice gentle as I crouched down to his eye level. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Dark hair plastered against his forehead, expensive-looking clothes soaked through, and eyes, striking amber eyes, wide with fear and something else. Recognition? No, that couldn't be right. I'd never seen this child before. "I can't find my daddy," he finally whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm. We were at the restaurant and I went to look at the fish tank, and when I came back, everyone was gone. My heart clenched. What kind of father leaves his 8-year-old son behind at a restaurant? I glanced up and down the deserted street. The rain was coming down harder now, and the temperature was dropping. "Which restaurant were you at, sweetheart? Maybe we can go back there and see if your dad is looking for you." "La Terrazza," he said, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "The one with the big fountain. I knew the place. An exclusive Italian restaurant about 6 blocks from here, the kind where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. The kind of place where people like me enter through the back door, if at all." "Okay," I said, making a quick decision. "My name is Emma. What's yours?" "Luca," he said, still watching me warily. "Nice to meet you, Luca. Listen, I'm going to help you find your dad, all right? But first, let's get you out of this rain." I shrugged off my jacket and wrapped it around his shoulders. It was too big for him, but at least it was something. I checked my watch again. 9:52 p.m. I'd already missed my bus. "Come on," I said, offering my hand. "Let's get you somewhere warm and dry and we'll call your dad." Luca stared at my outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly placed his smaller one in mine. His fingers were ice cold, but his grip was surprisingly strong. We walked 3 blocks in the rain until we reached a 24-hour diner. The fluorescent lights inside made me squint after the darkness of the storm, and the few late-night patrons turned to stare as we entered. A bedraggled woman and a soaking wet child who clearly didn't belong together. "2 hot chocolates, please," I told the waitress, who raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. I guided Luca to a booth in the corner, away from curious eyes, and helped him out of his wet coat. Underneath, he wore what looked like a custom-tailored suit jacket over a white shirt and dark pants. Even drenched, the quality was obvious. Definitely not department store clothes. "Do you have a phone number for your dad?" I asked as the waitress set down 2 steaming mugs. Luca nodded, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a sleek smartphone that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The screen was dark. "It's dead," he said, his bottom lip trembling slightly. "That's okay," I assured him. "We can use the diner phone. Do you know his number?" Luca recited a string of digits that I carefully wrote down on a napkin. I was about to stand up and ask the waitress to use their phone when the bell above the diner door chimed. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying with it the scent of expensive cologne and danger. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. The cook peered out from the kitchen, then quickly disappeared again. The waitress froze, coffee pot suspended in midair. I didn't turn around immediately. Something primitive in my brain told me not to make any sudden movements, like I was sharing space with a predator. When I finally did look, my breath caught in my throat. A man stood in the doorway, water dripping from his black overcoat onto the linoleum floor. He was tall, imposingly so, with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that seemed to compress the air around him. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, a day's worth of stubble darkening his jaw. But it was his eyes that made my skin prickle with goosebumps, the exact same unusual amber color as Luca's, now narrowed as they scanned the diner. Behind him stood two more men, both in dark suits despite the hour, both with the unmistakable bulge of weapons beneath their jackets. They flanked the doorway like sentinels, their expressions impassive as they surveyed the room. "Daddy!" Luca's excited cry shattered the silence. He scrambled out of the booth and ran toward the man. The transformation on the man's face was immediate and startling. The hardness melted away, replaced by naked relief as he dropped to one knee and caught Luca in an embrace that lifted the boy off the ground. "Luca," he murmured, his voice a deep rumble that somehow carried across the diner. "Where have you been? I've been looking everywhere for you." "I got lost," Luca said into his father's shoulder, "but Miss Emma found me and bought me hot chocolate." And just like that, the full weight of that amber gaze shifted to me. I felt pinned to my seat, unable to move as the man stood, keeping one hand firmly on his son's shoulder as he studied me. There was something calculating in his expression, something that made me feel like I was being dismantled and reassembled in his mind. "Miss Emma," he repeated, my name in his mouth sounding like something foreign and precious. A small, dangerous smile curved his lips. "I believe I owe you a debt of gratitude." I swallowed hard, finding my voice. Anyone would have done the same. His smile widened fractionally, revealing white teeth. "No, Miss Emma, they wouldn't have." He gestured to one of the men behind him, who immediately approached our booth. I tensed, but the man merely placed a thick envelope on the table. "For your kindness," Luca's father said. I didn't touch the envelope. "I don't want your money. I just wanted to help Luca." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, as if coming to a decision. "Marco," he said, not taking his eyes off me. The second man stepped forward. "Call Antonio and tell him to bring the car around. And find out everything there is to know about Miss Sinclair," I supplied, regretting it immediately. Emma Sinclair. Everything about Miss Sinclair. A chill that had nothing to do with my wet clothes crept up my spine. Who was this man that he could walk into a room and command it so completely? Why did he need to find out everything about me? And why did I suddenly feel like I'd stepped into something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple act of kindness? "I really should be going," I said, sliding toward the edge of the booth. "I've missed my bus, but I can call a taxi." "Nonsense." He cut me off smoothly. "It's the least I can do to give you a ride home. I insist." The way he said insist made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Luca looked up at me, his earlier wariness replaced by a hopeful smile. "Please, Miss Emma. Daddy's car is really cool. It has TV screens and a mini fridge." I looked from Luca's innocent face to his father's inscrutable one and knew I was trapped. The smart thing would be to politely decline, to keep my distance from this man who radiated power and control. But something told me that walking away wasn't an option anymore. "Thank you," I said finally. "That's very generous." The man extended his hand to me, and after a brief hesitation, I took it. His skin was warm despite the rain, his grip firm but not crushing. "Salvatore Russo," he introduced himself, "and I am the one who should be thanking you, Miss Sinclair. You have no idea how precious my son is to me." The way he said precious sent another shiver through me. There was possession in his voice, an undertone of steel that suggested he would do anything, to protect what was his. And as he guided me out of the diner with one hand lightly at the small of my back, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just become entangled in something I might never escape. The car waiting outside the diner wasn't just a car. It was a fortress on wheels, sleek, black, and longer than any vehicle had a right to be. It hummed with quiet power against the curb. The rain seemed to avoid touching it, beating and rolling off the glossy surface, as if even water knew better than to leave marks on Salvatore Russo's possessions. A man in a dark suit held an umbrella over us as we approached. He didn't meet my eyes, but I felt his assessment as I passed, like being scanned by a human security system. The driver opened the rear door, revealing an interior that looked more like a luxury living room than transportation. Creamy leather seats, dark wood paneling, and, as Luca had promised, multiple screens, and what appeared to be a fully stocked minibar. "After you, Miss Sinclair," Salvatore said, his hand still hovering at the small of my back. Not quite touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his palm. I climbed in, awkwardly aware of my damp clothes and the way they would stain the pristine leather. Luca scrambled in after me, seemingly unconcerned about his own wet attire as he bounced onto the seat across from mine. Salvatore followed last, his large frame making the spacious interior suddenly feel claustrophobic. "Where do you live, Miss Sinclair?" he asked as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. I hesitated. Giving my address to a stranger, especially one like Salvatore Russo, went against every instinct of self-preservation I had. But refusing would be pointless. He'd already instructed his man to find out everything about me. "Oakwood Heights," I said finally, "on Maple Street." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe surprise. Oakwood Heights was about as far from Westwood Hills as you could get while still being in the same city. It was the kind of neighborhood where rent was cheap because half the streetlights didn't work, and the police response time averaged 40 minutes. "Marco," Salvatore said to the driver, not needing to specify further. The privacy partition slid up silently, leaving the three of us enclosed in a bubble of luxury and awkward silence. I stared out the window, watching raindrops race each other down the tinted glass, acutely aware of Salvatore watching me. "So, Miss Emma," he finally said, his voice softer than before, "what were you doing in Westwood Hills so late at night?" "I work there," I replied, meeting his gaze despite the way it made my pulse quicken. "I clean houses." "You're a maid." It wasn't a question, but there was no judgment in his tone either. Just a statement of fact, as if he were cataloging information. "Yes." I lifted my chin slightly, for several families in the area. "And today?" "The Morrisons. They had a dinner party." His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Charles Morrison, the district attorney?" I nodded, wondering why that particular detail seemed to displease him. "Do you work for him often?" "Tuesdays and Fridays. I have different houses each day of the week." "And they make you take the bus home at this hour?" There was something dangerous in his voice now, a quiet anger that seemed disproportionate to the situation. I shifted uncomfortably. "That's normal. Most of us do." "Most of us?" He raised an eyebrow. "Housekeepers, service workers." I shrugged, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my tone. "We can't all afford chauffeurs, Mr. Russo." To my surprise, he laughed, a rich, deep sound that transformed his face completely. The severe lines softened, and for a moment, I could see the father in him, rather than whatever else he was. "Touché, Miss Sinclair." His amber eyes gleamed with amusement. "You have spirit. I like that." Before I could respond, Luca piped up from his seat. "Miss Emma, do you clean a lot of big houses?" Grateful for the interruption, I turned my attention to the boy. He had nestled into the corner of the seat, my jacket still wrapped around his shoulders despite the car's comfortable temperature. "I do. Some of them are bigger than my entire apartment building." "Do you ever get to swim in their pools?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. I smiled at his innocent question. No, that wouldn't be allowed. I just clean them. That's stupid, Luca declared with the absolute certainty of an 8-year-old. If I had a pool, I'd let everyone swim in it. That's very generous of you, I said, my smile widening. Luca, Salvatore interjected gently. Miss Emma works very hard. It's not a game. The boy's expression turned solemn. I'm sorry, Miss Emma. I didn't mean to be rude. You weren't rude at all, I assured him. It's a nice thought. Luca beamed at me, then yawned widely, the excitement and stress of the evening clearly catching up with him. He curled up on the seat, eyelids drooping. You should get some rest, piccolo mio, Salvatore said, his voice softening to a tender rumble. He reached across to brush Luca's damp hair from his forehead, with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his intimidating presence. We'll be home soon. But I want to talk to Miss Emma, Luca protested, even as his eyes drifted closed. There will be time for that, Salvatore said, his gaze shifting to me with an intensity that made my mouth go dry. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of Miss Emma. The way he said it, not as a question or suggestion, but as a simple statement of fact, sent a chill through me. It sounded like a promise or a threat. Within minutes, Luca was asleep, his soft breath fogging the window beside him. I watched his peaceful face, wondering about his life, about what kind of childhood he had with a father like Salvatore Russo. He likes you, Salvatore said, breaking the silence. He doesn't trust easily, neither do I. Mr. Russo. Salvatore, he corrected. Please. I hesitated, then continued. Salvatore, I appreciate the ride, but once you drop me off, we're even. You don't owe me anything for helping Luca, and I don't want anything from you. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And if I told you that's not how this works, that in my world debts must be paid, then I'd say this isn't your world, I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. It's just a car ride. Another smile, this one slower, more deliberate. You really don't know who I am, do you? The question hung in the air between us. Of course I didn't know who he was. We'd just met. But something in his tone suggested I should know, that his name should mean something to me. Should I asked. He leaned forward, closing some of the distance between us. I caught a whiff of his cologne, something expensive and subtle, with notes of cedar and amber. Perhaps it's better that you don't, he said finally. At least for now. The car slowed, and I realized with a start that we had reached my neighborhood. The rain had eased to a gentle patter, but the streets were still slick with water, reflecting the few functioning streetlights in wavering pools of yellow. Compared to Westwood Hills, with its manicured perfection, Oakwood Heights looked like a different planet. Number 1457, correct? The driver's voice came through a speaker. I hadn't told him my specific address, only the street. The realization that they had already obtained this information in the short time since leaving the diner sent a fresh wave of unease through me. Salvatore noticed my reaction. Does that surprise you, Emma? That I would want to know where you live? The casual use of my first name, without the miss, felt oddly intimate. It concerns me, I admitted. I'm nobody important, Mr. Russo. Just a housekeeper who happened to help your son. On the contrary, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You became important the moment you touched something that belongs to me. The possessiveness in those words made my skin prickle with goosebumps. The car stopped in front of my apartment building, a shabby 4-story walk-up with peeling paint and security bars on the lower windows. This is where you live? There was no disguising the displeasure in Salvatore's tone. Not all of us can afford penthouses in Westwood Hills, I said, reaching for the door handle. His hand shot out, closing over mine before I could open the door. His touch was warm, his fingers wrapping around mine with casual strength. Allow me, he said, pressing a button on the console beside him. The driver appeared at my door almost instantly, opening it and extending an umbrella. Salvatore slid across the seat, following me out of the car. I glanced nervously at Luca, still sleeping inside. He'll be fine, Salvatore assured me, correctly interpreting my concern. Marco will watch him. I want to see you safely inside. That's really not necessary. I insist. That word again, laden with authority. He placed his hand on my lower back, guiding me toward the building entrance. I was acutely aware of how we must look to my neighbors, me in my worn uniform, him in what was clearly a bespoke suit worth more than I made in months. Both of us sheltered under an umbrella held by a man who looked more bodyguard than chauffeur. We reached the front door, which had a broken lock that the landlord had been promising to fix for months. I fumbled for my keys anyway, more to have something to do with my hands than out of actual need. "4th floor, right side," Salvatore said, confirming he knew not just my address, but the exact location of my apartment. "No elevator." I swallowed hard. Like I said, not all of us live in luxury. And like I said, he countered, stepping closer until I could feel the heat from his body. Debts must be paid. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, pressing it into my palm. The paper was thick and textured, the lettering embossed in silver against black. It contained only his name and a phone number. "When you finish work tomorrow," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument, "a car will be waiting for you. Luca would like to thank you properly, and so would I. Dinner at my home." "I can't." "You can," he interrupted smoothly, "and you will. Consider it a request, if that makes you more comfortable, for now." The implied threat was subtle but unmistakable. I clutched the card tighter, feeling the edges dig into my palm. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing this? I just helped your son." Something flashed in his amber eyes. Something dark and hungry that made my breath catch. "Because you intrigue me, Emma Sinclair," he said, reaching up to brush a strand of damp hair from my face. The brief contact sent an electric current down my spine, and because I always get what I want. Before I could respond, he turned and walked back to the car, the umbrella-wielding man trailing behind him. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching as the sleek vehicle pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the night. Only then did I look down at the card in my hand, running my thumb over the embossed name. Salvatore Russo. A name that meant nothing to me yesterday but now felt like a sentence I couldn't escape. I climbed the 4 flights to my apartment, each step heavier than the last. The ancient radiator was cold, the pipes clanking in protest as I turned the valve. My tiny studio looked even more depressing than usual after the opulence of Russo's car. Water stains on the ceiling, mismatched furniture collected from thrift stores and sidewalk discards, a mattress on a metal frame that squeaked with every movement. I changed out of my damp clothes and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the business card. Common sense told me to throw it away, to call in sick tomorrow, maybe even to start looking for jobs in another city. There was something dangerous about Salvatore Russo, something predatory that set off all my warning bells. But as I finally lay down to catch a few hours of sleep before my 4 a.m. alarm, I couldn't stop thinking about Luca's hopeful smile when he'd asked me to come to their home. Or, more disturbingly, about the way Salvatore had looked at me, like I was a puzzle he intended to solve, piece by piece, whether I wanted him to or not. I fell asleep with the business card still clutched in my hand, dreaming of amber eyes and invisible chains. Morning came too quickly, the harsh blare of my alarm cutting through dreams I couldn't quite remember. My body protested as I dragged myself out of bed, muscles stiff from yesterday's work and too little sleep. The business card had left an imprint on my palm, the edges softened from my grip. I placed it on my nightstand, still undecided about what to do. The Donovan estate was my Wednesday morning assignment, a sprawling colonial with more bathrooms than people, and a collection of antiques that required special cloths and solutions to clean. Mrs. Donovan was particular about everything, from the angle of the vacuum lines on her carpet to the exact temperature at which her sheets should be ironed. As I scrubbed and polished, my mind kept drifting back to last night. The rain, Luca's tear-streaked face, Salvatore's intensity. I'd looked him up before leaving my apartment, using my ancient laptop with its spotty connection. There wasn't much, or rather, there was too much. Dozens of businessmen with the same name, none with photos that matched the man I'd met. It was as if he existed in a shadow world, visible only to those who already knew where to look. "You missed a spot." Mrs. Donovan's voice startled me out of my thoughts. She stood in the doorway of her master suite, immaculately dressed despite the early hour, one manicured finger pointing at an invisible smudge on the vanity mirror. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Donovan. I'll fix it right away." She lingered, watching as I reapplied glass cleaner and wiped in careful circles. "You seem distracted today, Emma. Is everything all right?" The concern in her voice was genuine, which made it worse somehow. Mrs. Donovan wasn't a bad person. None of my employers were, really. They just inhabited a different reality. One where people like me existed primarily to make their lives more comfortable. "I'm fine," I assured her. "Just didn't sleep well." She nodded sympathetically. "Well, try to focus. The Hendersons are coming for lunch, and you know how Judith is about cleanliness." I did know. Mrs. Henderson had once followed me around with a white glove, checking surfaces after I'd cleaned them. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of tasks and checklists. By the time I finished at the Donovans and moved on to my afternoon job at the Blackwell residence, my arms ached, and my thoughts had circled back to the question that had been haunting me since dawn. Would I go to Salvatore Russo's home tonight? Every rational part of me screamed no. Men like him, wealthy, powerful, used to getting their way, didn't invite women like me to dinner out of simple gratitude. There would be strings attached, expectations I couldn't begin to imagine. But then I thought of Luca, with his innocent questions about swimming pools, and his father's jacket dwarfing his small frame. He was just a child who wanted to thank the person who had helped him, and despite my misgivings about his father, I couldn't shake the memory of Salvatore's face when he'd first seen Luca in the diner, that moment of naked relief, of genuine love that had transformed his hard features into something almost vulnerable. The Blackwells' housekeeper, Maria, noticed my distraction as we worked together folding fresh laundry. "What's got you so quiet today?" she asked in her heavily accented English. "Boy problems?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Not exactly." "Girl problems, then?" She winked. "No, nothing like that. Just met someone unusual last night." Unusual good or unusual bad? I considered the question, my hands automatically smoothing wrinkles from an Egyptian cotton sheet that cost more than my monthly food budget. "Both, I think. Definitely complicated." Maria nodded sagely. "The complicated ones are always the most interesting, but also the most dangerous." She pointed a finger at me. "You be careful, Emma. Pretty girl like you, working in these neighborhoods. Rich men think everything is for sale." Her warning stayed with me as I finished my shift at the Blackwells. By the time I gathered my supplies and prepared to leave, the sun was already setting, painting the manicured gardens in shades of gold and amber, the same color as Salvatore's eyes. I stepped outside and felt my heart stutter. A black car, identical to the one from last night, was parked at the curb. The same driver, Marco, I remembered, stood beside it, his expression impassive as he spotted me. How had they known where I would be? I hadn't told Salvatore my schedule, only that I cleaned houses in Westwood Hills. The realization that he had been investigating me, tracking my movements, sent a chill down my spine despite the warm evening air. I could turn around, go back inside, ask the Blackwells if I could use their phone to call a taxi. But even as I considered it, Marco opened the rear door of the car, his message clear. This wasn't really a choice. With a deep breath, I approached the vehicle, half expecting to find Salvatore inside. Instead, the back seat was empty, the leather interior gleaming in the fading light. "Mr. Russo is expecting you," Marco said, his voice neutral as I hesitated at the door. "He asked that I ensure your comfort during the drive." "Where exactly are we going?" I asked, still not entering the car. "Mr. Russo's residence on North Lake Shore." And North Lake Shore was the most exclusive address in the city, a stretch of private properties along the waterfront, where homes started at 8 figures and went up from there. Of course, that's where he lived. "I'm not dressed for dinner," I said, glancing down at my uniform, a plain gray dress with practical black shoes. "I should go home and change first." Marco's expression didn't change, but something like amusement flickered in his eyes. Mr. Russo anticipated that concern. "There are suitable clothes waiting for you at the house." Of course there were. I swallowed my pride and slid into the car, trying to ignore the implications of a man I'd just met selecting clothing for me to wear. The drive took nearly 40 minutes, winding through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, until we turned onto a private road protected by a guarded gate that opened automatically as we approached. The ground stretched for what seemed like acres. Perfectly maintained gardens, illuminated fountains, and eventually, the house itself. Except house was an inadequate word for the structure that loomed against the darkening sky. It was an estate, a compound, a monument to wealth and power that made even the Westwood Hills mansions look modest by comparison. Marco pulled up to the front entrance, where stone steps led to massive double doors flanked by marble columns. Before he could exit the car to open my door, one of the front doors swung open, and Luca came bounding down the steps. "Miss Emma, you came!" His excitement was palpable as Marco opened my door and the boy nearly launched himself at me. "I told Daddy you would come, but he said you might be too busy, but I knew you would." I couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. He was wearing what appeared to be pajamas, expensive-looking blue silk with embroidered edges, and his hair was damp, as if he'd just had a bath. "Of course I came," I said, allowing him to grab my hand and tug me toward the house. "I wanted to make sure you were okay after last night." "I'm excellent," he declared, in that oddly adult way some children have. Daddy wasn't even mad at me for getting lost. Well, maybe a little mad, but not a lot. He was too happy that you found me. As we reached the top of the steps, I saw Salvatore standing in the doorway, his imposing figure silhouetted against the warm light from inside. He'd exchanged his suit for more casual attire, dark trousers, and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. The effect was no less intimidating. "Miss Sinclair," he greeted me, his voice wrapping around my name like silk. "I'm pleased you could join us." Before I could respond, Luca was pulling me inside, chattering excitedly. "I want to show Miss Emma everything, Daddy. Can I show her the pool, and the game room, and Jupiter?" "Who's Jupiter?" I asked, momentarily distracted from Salvatore's presence. "My dog. He's huge, like this big." Luca stretched his arms wide. "He's a cane corso. That's Italian. Like us." "Perhaps after dinner," Salvatore suggested, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Miss Emma might like to freshen up first." Luca's face fell slightly, but he nodded. "Okay, but you promise I can show her later?" "I promise, Piccolo." A woman appeared, slender, middle-aged, with a kind face and an air of quiet efficiency. "Luca, it's time for your medicine." The boy made a face. "But Nonna Sofia, Miss Emma just got here, and she'll still be here after you take your medicine." "The woman," Sofia said firmly. Luca sighed dramatically, but released my hand. "Fine. But don't start dinner without me." Sofia gave me a warm smile as she led Luca away, leaving me alone with Salvatore in the vast marble entryway. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over artwork that belonged in museums, furnishings that looked antique and priceless, and floors that I would have been terrified to clean. "Medicine?" I asked, concern overriding my nervousness. "Is Luca sick?" Something like pain flickered across Salvatore's face. "Asthma. Usually controlled, but the rain last night. It can trigger attacks." Guilt washed over me. I should have gotten him inside sooner. I didn't realize— "Stop," Salvatore said, his tone gentle but firm. "You found my son lost and alone in a storm. You kept him safe when I could not. There is no scenario where I am anything but grateful to you, Emma." The use of my first name again, intimate, assuming a familiarity we didn't have. Yet somehow, I didn't mind it as much as I should have. "Let me show you where you can change," he continued, gesturing toward a sweeping staircase. "Sofia has prepared a room for you." I followed him up the stairs, trying not to gape at my surroundings. The upper hallway was lined with what appeared to be original oil paintings in ornate frames, each illuminated by its own discreet lighting. "Your home is beautiful," I said, for lack of anything more intelligent to offer. "It's just a house," he replied, surprising me. "Walls and floors, nothing more." We stopped at a door, which he opened to reveal a bedroom suite larger than my entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the lake, now a sheet of black glass reflecting the moon. "The bathroom is through there." He indicated a door to the right. "You'll find everything you need. The closet has several options that should fit you." "How did you know my size?" I asked before I could stop myself. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. I'm very good at assessing people, Emma. The way his eyes traveled over me as he said it made heat rise to my cheeks. I looked away, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. Dinner will be in 30 minutes, he continued. Sophia will come to escort you down when it's time. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. I'm glad you came, Emma, despite your reservations. How do you know I had reservations? His smile widened slightly. Because you're intelligent, and intelligence breeds caution. With that cryptic statement, he left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood frozen for a moment, then moved to explore the room that was temporarily mine. The bathroom was a marvel of marble and glass, with a shower large enough for 4 people and a selection of toiletries that probably cost more than I made in a week. In the closet, I found not several options, but what appeared to be an entire wardrobe. Dresses, blouses, skirts, even shoes, all in my size or close enough. The tags were still on many of them, all from designers I recognized from magazines but had never dreamed of wearing. I selected the simplest option I could find, a navy blue dress with a modest neckline and hem that fell just below my knees. It fit perfectly, which was both impressive and unsettling. After a quick shower, I towel-dried my hair and applied the minimal makeup I had in my bag. By the time Sophia knocked on the door, I looked presentable, if out of place in my surroundings. You look lovely, she said warmly as I opened the door. That color suits you. Thank you, I replied, grateful for her kindness. Are you Salvatore's mother? She laughed, the sound gentle and musical. Oh no, dear, just the housekeeper. But I've been with the family since before Luca was born. He calls all the staff members Nonna or Nono. It's his way. As we walked back downstairs, I gathered my courage to ask the question that had been bothering me. Sophia, who exactly is Salvatore Russo? What does he do? She glanced at me with a hint of surprise. You truly don't know. I shook my head. He has many businesses, she said carefully. Import-export, real estate, shipping. He's a very successful man. Her answer was both informative and evasive, deepening rather than dispelling my suspicions. But before I could press further, we had reached the dining room, where Salvatore and Luca were waiting. The table was set for 3, though it could easily have seated 20. Luca's face lit up when he saw me, and he patted the chair beside him. Miss Emma, you look pretty. Sit next to me, okay? I smiled, moving to the indicated chair. Thank you, Luca, and you can just call me Emma. Salvatore watched our interaction with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between satisfaction and hunger that made my skin prickle with awareness. Wine? He offered, already pouring a deep red liquid into a crystal glass beside my plate. Just a little, I said, knowing I needed my wits about me. The dinner that followed was surreal. Course after course of exquisite food served by silent staff, who appeared and disappeared with practiced efficiency. Luca dominated the conversation with stories about school, his dog, and 1,000 questions about my life that I answered as vaguely as possible under Salvatore's watchful gaze. Do you have any kids? Luca asked between bites of what appeared to be homemade pasta. No, I don't. Are you married? Luca, Salvatore interjected mildly. It's impolite to interrogate our guest. It's okay, I assured him. No, Luca, I'm not married. Do you have a boyfriend? I felt the weight of Salvatore's attention sharpen. No, I admitted. I don't have time for relationships. I work a lot. That's sad, Luca declared with a child's brutal honesty. Everyone should have someone, right, Daddy? Salvatore's amber eyes locked with mine across the table. Yes, he said softly. Everyone should have someone. The moment stretched between us, taut with unspoken meaning. I broke the connection first, taking a sip of wine to steady my nerves. Can I show Emma Jupiter now? Luca asked, apparently satisfied with his investigation of my personal life. I'm finished eating. Salvatore checked his watch. It's nearly your bedtime, Piccolo. Please, Daddy. Just for a few minutes? I promised him I'd bring a new friend. Salvatore's resistance crumbled under his son's pleading gaze. Very well. 10 minutes with Jupiter, then bed. No negotiations. Luca beamed, nearly bouncing out of his chair. Thank you, Daddy. Come on, Emma. He grabbed my hand, tugging me from my seat with surprising strength for such a small body. I glanced at Salvatore, who nodded his permission with a small smile that softened his stern features. We'll have coffee on the terrace when you return, he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Luca led me through the house, past rooms filled with antiques and artwork, down a hallway lined with what appeared to be family photographs. I caught glimpses of Luca as a younger child, always with Salvatore, never with a woman who might be his mother. I wanted to stop and look more closely, to search for clues about this family I'd become entangled with, but Luca's excitement wouldn't allow for delays. We reached a set of glass doors that opened onto a sprawling garden, illuminated by discreet landscape lighting. The night air was cool and fragrant with late-blooming flowers. In the distance, I could hear the gentle lapping of lake water against a private shoreline. Jupiter stays in his special house at night, Luca explained, leading me toward a structure that looked more luxurious than many human dwellings. He's really big, but don't be scared. He's super nice unless Daddy tells him not to be. The ominous addendum to this reassurance made me hesitate, but before I could voice any concerns, a massive shape emerged from the doghouse. Jupiter was indeed super big, at least 150 pounds of solid muscle covered in short black fur. His head was broad and powerful, with intelligent eyes that assessed me carefully. Jupiter, this is Emma, Luca said, his voice taking on a commanding tone that echoed his father's. She's a friend. Friend, Jupiter. The enormous dog approached slowly, his movements deliberate as he circled me, sniffing intently. I stood perfectly still, remembering childhood lessons about not showing fear to animals. After a complete circuit, Jupiter sat directly in front of me, his head reaching my chest even in this position. He wants you to pet him, Luca explained. It means he likes you. Cautiously, I extended my hand, allowing Jupiter to sniff it before gently stroking the short fur on his massive head. The dog leaned into my touch, eyes half closing with pleasure. See? I told you he'd like you, Luca said triumphantly. Jupiter is the best judge of character. That's what Daddy says. If Jupiter doesn't like someone, they aren't allowed to come back to our house. That's quite a responsibility for a dog, I commented, scratching behind Jupiter's ears. Daddy says animals see things humans miss, like they can smell if someone is afraid or lying. Luca picked up a ball from a basket of dog toys. Want to see him catch? He can jump really high. For the next few minutes, I watched as Luca and Jupiter played, the huge dog surprisingly gentle with the small boy. Their obvious affection for each other was touching, Jupiter constantly checking on Luca, positioning himself between the child and the broader world, alert even in play. Luca, Sophia's voice called from the terrace. Time to come in, Tesoro. It's past your bedtime. The boy's face fell, but he didn't argue. Okay, Nonna Sophia. He turned to me. Will you come tuck me in, please? Daddy always does it, but he said he has to talk to you about grown-up things. My heart squeezed at the innocent request. Of course, if your father doesn't mind. He won't mind, Luca said with absolute certainty. He likes you. I can tell. Jupiter accompanied us back to the house, padding silently beside Luca like a living shadow. At the glass doors, Sophia waited with a warm smile and an outstretched hand. Come along, Luca. Bath first, then story time. Emma's going to tuck me in, Luca informed her, taking her hand but looking back at me to confirm. I'll be there, I promised. After your bath. Sophia gave me a gentle nod. 3rd floor, 2nd door on the right. About 15 minutes. As they disappeared into the house, Jupiter remained at my side, his warm body pressed against my leg in a gesture that felt oddly protective. I stroked his head absently, taking a moment to absorb the surreal quality of the evening. 24 hours ago, I had been a nameless maid catching the last bus home after cleaning toilets. Now I was standing in an estate garden wearing a designer dress, about to tuck in the son of a man who was either a legitimate business mogul or something far more dangerous. I see you've been accepted into the family guard. Salvatore's voice startled me. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. Jupiter immediately went to him, receiving a firm stroke down his muscular back. "Luca asked me to tuck him in," I said, suddenly unsure of myself. "I hope that's all right." "More than all right," Salvatore replied, his expression softening. "It will mean a great deal to him." He led me back inside, Jupiter trailing behind us until a quiet command in what sounded like Italian sent the dog padding away down a separate hallway. "Coffee on the terrace, as promised," Salvatore said, gesturing toward an outdoor space furnished with comfortable-looking seating. "It will be waiting when you're finished with Luca." He paused, then added, "Thank you for indulging him. His mother isn't in the picture. Hasn't been since he was an infant." The admission surprised me, not the information itself, which I had already guessed, but that he had volunteered it. "I'm sorry," I said reflexively. "That must be difficult for him, for both of us," Salvatore replied, a flash of something raw and painful crossing his features before disappearing behind his composed mask. "Third floor, second door on the right. Sophia will have him ready." I followed his directions, climbing another flight of stairs that led to what appeared to be the family's private quarters. The hallway was warmer here, more lived in, with children's artwork framed alongside what looked like museum-quality pieces. I recognized Luca's artistic style immediately: bold colors and slightly asymmetrical figures, all signed with his name in careful capital letters. I found his room easily, the door ajar and soft light spilling into the hallway. The space inside was a child's paradise, spacious but cozy, with shelves of books and toys, a desk with art supplies, and a bed shaped like a racing car. Luca sat in the middle of it, already in pajamas, hair damp from his bath. Sophia was just finishing reading from a book, which she closed gently when she saw me. "Perfect timing," she said warmly. "I was just finishing the chapter." Luca's face lit up when he spotted me in the doorway. "Emma, you came!" I promised, didn't I? I moved into the room as Sophia excused herself with a gentle pat on Luca's head. "Did you see my pictures?" Luca asked, pointing to the walls where several of his drawings were displayed. "Daddy puts up all my best ones." "They're wonderful," I said sincerely, sitting on the edge of his race car bed. "You're very talented." He beamed at the praise, then suddenly grew serious. "Emma, are you going to come back and visit us again?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know, Luca. Your father and I don't really know each other, but you saved me," he said with a child's simple logic. "And Jupiter likes you. And I like you." "I like you too," I admitted. "Very much." "Then you have to come back. Daddy always says family is forever, and people who help family become family." I didn't know how to respond to that. The idea that Salvatore Russo considered me family after one chance encounter was both touching and deeply unsettling. "We'll see," I said finally, pulling his covers up. "It's complicated, Luca. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to answer," he grumbled, but settled back against his pillows. I smiled, unable to deny his accusation. "Get some sleep now. It was an honor meeting you, Luca Russo." "Emma?" he called as I reached the door. "Will you leave the nightlight on? Sometimes I have bad dreams about getting lost again." My heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. "Of course." I adjusted the small lamp on his bedside table, casting a gentle glow across the room. "Sweet dreams, Luca. Night, Emma." "Tell Daddy I said goodnight too." I closed his door softly and stood in the hallway for a moment, composing myself. There was something about Luca, his openness, his innocent acceptance, that made it hard to maintain my wariness about this situation. But children didn't see the complexities, the potential dangers that adults recognized. And there was danger here. I felt it as surely as I felt the plush carpet beneath my feet. I made my way back downstairs and out to the terrace, where Salvatore waited. The space was illuminated by subtle lighting and warmed by discreet heaters that pushed back the evening chill. Lake Michigan stretched before us, a vast darkness broken only by distant lights of boats and the reflection of the moon. "Is he asleep?" Salvatore asked as I approached. "Nearly. He asked me to tell you goodnight." Salvatore nodded, gesturing to the chair across from him. A delicate cup of coffee waited for me, alongside what appeared to be an expensive cognac. "He likes you," Salvatore said as I sat. "That's unusual. Luca is cautious with strangers. He's a wonderful child, I replied honestly. You've done a good job with him. Something shifted in Salvatore's expression. A softening around the eyes, a barely perceptible relaxation of his shoulders. That is perhaps the highest compliment anyone could pay me. I sipped my coffee, using the moment to gather my thoughts. Salvatore, I appreciate the dinner and your hospitality. But I'm still not clear on why I'm here. You've thanked me for helping Luca. You've fed me, clothed me. The debt, as you called it, is more than paid. He studied me over the rim of his cognac glass, amber liquid matching amber eyes. You believe this is still about obligation? Isn't it? Perhaps initially, he conceded. But now I find myself curious. About what? About you, Emma Sinclair. The woman who would help a lost child in the rain without thought of reward or recognition. The woman who would refuse money from a grateful father. The woman who works cleaning the homes of people who don't deserve to breathe the same air as her, yet maintains her dignity and pride. His assessment left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it came out smaller than I intended. You've had me investigated, thoroughly, he admitted without a hint of apology. I know about your childhood in the foster system, your scholarship to community college that you couldn't complete because you needed to work full-time, the 3 jobs you currently hold to make ends meet, the money you send each month to your former foster brother's family. Each revelation felt like a physical blow. The idea that this man, this virtual stranger, knew so much about me, had peeled back the layers of my life without permission, made me feel violated and exposed. That's an invasion of privacy, I said, setting down my coffee cup with slightly trembling hands. Privacy is an illusion, Emma. One that the wealthy and powerful dispelled long ago. And which are you? I asked boldly. Wealthy or powerful? His lips curved in a dangerous smile. Both. Though one inevitably follows the other. Who are you really, Salvatore? What do you do that allows you to live like this? To have people investigated overnight, to command such deference from everyone around you? He considered me for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. I told you, I have many businesses. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need right now. His tone had hardened, a warning edge creeping in. I should go, I said, rising from my chair. Thank you for dinner, but sit down, Emma. The command was quiet but unmistakable. Please, he added, almost as an afterthought. Against my better judgment, I sank back into my seat. I have work tomorrow, early. You don't, he corrected me. I've arranged for replacements at all your jobs for the next week, with full pay to you, of course. Anger flared hot and bright within me. You had no right to do that. Those are my jobs. My responsibility. Jobs that exploit you, that pay you a fraction of what you're worth, that would replace you in a heartbeat if you became inconvenient. He leaned forward, his intensity magnetic. Tell me I'm wrong. I couldn't, and that only fueled my frustration. That's not the point. You can't just rearrange my life without my consent. I can, he said simply, but I would prefer your consent. For what? I want you to spend time with Luca, he said, surprising me with the direction of the conversation. He needs a female influence in his life. Someone kind but strong, someone who sees him as a child, not as my son. You want me to be his babysitter? I asked incredulously. I want you to be whatever you choose to be, Salvatore replied. But I'm offering you an opportunity, Emma, to leave behind the life that has trapped you, to step into something more. In exchange for what? I couldn't keep the suspicion from my voice. Men like Salvatore Russo didn't offer something for nothing. He set down his glass, his expression turning serious. In my world, Emma, loyalty is everything. When someone shows loyalty to my family, as you did with Luca, I return that loyalty tenfold. I wasn't being loyal, I argued. I was just being decent. Any person would have done the same. No, he said with absolute certainty. They wouldn't have. And that's precisely why I want you in our lives. The implication hung between us, not just in Luca's life, but in their lives. In his life. You don't know me, I said softly. I know enough. he countered. The rest
The
I
heat
wanted to
in his
discover.
gaze made my skin flush.
Unless I've misread your interest. I didn't say I was interested, I protested too quickly. His smile returned, knowing and predatory. You didn't have to. Your eyes betray you, Emma. They always have. Before I could formulate a response, a man appeared at the terrace entrance. Not Marco, but another suited figure with the same watchful demeanor. Excuse the interruption, boss, he said, his tone deferential. There's a situation that requires your attention. Salvatore's expression hardened instantly, the brief warmth I'd glimpsed vanishing behind a mask of cold authority. Now? I'm afraid so, sir. Vincenzo called. It's about the shipment. Something dangerous flashed in Salvatore's eyes. He stood abruptly, buttoning his jacket with a fluid motion. Take Miss Sinclair home when she's ready. Ensure she arrives safely. Yes, sir. He turned to me, and for a brief moment the mask slipped. I apologize for cutting our evening short. We have unfinished business, you and I. Salvatore, I began, not even sure what I wanted to say. He reached down, taking my hand in his. His touch was warm, his fingers strong as they closed around mine. Consider my offer, Emma. A week. Give us 1 week of your time. If after that you wish to return to your old life, I won't stop you. The promise sounded sincere, but something in his expression told me he was already certain of the outcome. As if I were a foregone conclusion, a puzzle already solved. And if I say no? I asked, needing to know there was still a choice. He raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against my knuckles that sent a jolt of electricity through my body. Then I would be disappointed, but I would respect your decision. I am many things, Emma, but I am not a man who forces his will on those who truly refuse him. The careful phrasing wasn't lost on me. And how do you know if someone truly refuses? His smile turned enigmatic. I just know. He released my hand reluctantly. Think about it. Marco will bring you home. With that, he turned and followed the suited man into the house, leaving me alone on the terrace with a cooling cup of coffee and a decision that felt much weightier than a simple yes or no. I barely slept that night, lying awake in my tiny apartment as rain tapped against the window. A softer, gentler version of the downpour that had first brought Luca into my life. Salvatore's offer circled in my mind like a predator, alternately tempting and terrifying. 1 week. 1 week in that world of luxury and danger, of amber eyes and unspoken power. 1 week to decide if I wanted to step permanently into whatever Salvatore Russo was offering. By morning, exhaustion had made the decision for me. I would give them a week, not for Salvatore's intensity that both attracted and unsettled me, but for Luca's innocent hope, for the boy who had nightmares about being lost, who drew pictures his father proudly displayed, who needed someone to see him as just a child. Marco arrived precisely at 9, as if he'd known the exact moment I would reach my decision. He didn't seem surprised when I opened the door before he could knock, a small bag of essentials in hand. Miss Sinclair, he greeted me with a slight nod. Mr. Russo will be pleased. The drive back to the lakeside estate passed in contemplative silence. I watched the city transform around us, from my neighborhood of pawnshops and check-cashing storefronts to the gleaming high-rises downtown, then through the exclusive suburbs, and finally to the secluded world of old money and even older power, where Salvatore's home stood apart from all others. Luca was waiting on the front steps, bouncing with excitement when he spotted the car. Jupiter sat beside him, a massive guardian alert to every movement around his young charge. Sophia stood in the doorway, her expression warm but reserved, watching as Luca raced down to meet us. Emma, you came back, he exclaimed as Marco opened my door. Daddy said you might, but I wasn't sure, and I've been watching for hours and hours. It's only been 45 minutes, Tesoro, Sophia called with gentle amusement. That's still hours in kid time, Luca insisted, grabbing my hand. Come on, I want to show you everything. Daddy said you're staying for a whole week, which means we can go swimming and play in the game room and I can show you my school and— Luca, Sophia interrupted his excited rambling. Let Miss Emma catch her breath. She just arrived. Where is your father? I asked, trying to ignore the flutter of anticipation at the thought of seeing Salvatore again. Luca's face fell slightly. He had to go to work. He said to tell you he's sorry and he'll be back for dinner. He brightened again almost immediately. But that means I get you all to myself until then. The day that followed was a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Luca showed me everything, from the Olympic-sized indoor pool where he demonstrated his swimming prowess, to the home theater with its rows of plush seats, to the game room filled with every entertainment system imaginable. Throughout it all, Jupiter shadowed us, his watchful eyes never straying far from Luca. Sophia appeared periodically with snacks, drinks, and gentle reminders about Luca's schedule. I learned that he was homeschooled by a rotation of private tutors, that his asthma prevented him from participating in certain sports, and that Salvatore rarely allowed him to leave the estate without an extensive security detail. "It's because of Daddy's work," Luca explained as we sat by the pool, dangling our feet in the water during his afternoon break. "Some people don't like him, so they might try to hurt me to hurt him." The casual way he said it, this 8-year-old child discussing potential kidnapping as if it were an ordinary fact of life, made my heart ache. "Does that scare you?" I asked carefully. He considered the question with surprising seriousness. "Sometimes. But Daddy says fear is okay as long as you don't let it stop you from living." He kicked his feet, sending ripples across the water's surface. "And anyway, I've got Jupiter and Uncle Marco and Uncle Vincent. No one can get past them." As evening approached, I helped Luca with his homework, advanced mathematics and Italian language studies that seemed well beyond standard third-grade curriculum. Before Sophia shepherded him upstairs to change for dinner, I retreated to the guest room I'd been assigned, a beautiful space with its own balcony overlooking the lake. The closet had been filled with more clothes in my size, everything from casual wear to evening gowns, all with designer labels. I chose a simple emerald green dress that complemented my eyes, paired with low heels that I could actually walk in. When I came downstairs, the house had transformed. Subtle lighting created an intimate atmosphere, and the dining room table had been set with fine china and crystal. Music played softly from hidden speakers, classical piano that made the space feel like a scene from another era. Luca was already seated, dressed in what appeared to be a child-sized version of his father's usual attire, dark trousers and a crisp white shirt. "You look pretty," he said with childlike directness as I entered. "Green is my favorite color." "Mine too," I smiled, taking a seat beside him. "Is your father joining us?" As if summoned by the question, Salvatore appeared in the doorway. He had changed since morning, now wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his body. His expression softened visibly when he saw me, the perpetual hardness around his eyes melting into something warmer. "Emma," he said, my name a caress in his accented voice. "You look beautiful." A flush of heat rose to my cheeks. "Thank you. Luca has been an excellent host in your absence." "Has he?" Salvatore moved to ruffle his son's hair affectionately before taking his seat at the head of the table. "I'm not surprised. He gets his charm from me." Luca giggled. "Nonna Sofia says I get my charm from her." "Perhaps a combination," Salvatore conceded with a genuine smile. "The best of both worlds." Dinner was served by an efficient staff who appeared and disappeared like shadows, multi-course Italian cuisine that made my usual microwave meals seem like a different species of food entirely. The conversation flowed easily, largely driven by Luca's enthusiastic recounting of our day together. I noticed how attentive Salvatore was to his son, asking specific questions and listening with genuine interest to every answer, no matter how trivial. When Luca's bedtime arrived, he asked if both of us would tuck him in. The request seemed to please Salvatore, who exchanged a glance with me that held a multitude of unspoken meanings. We followed the bedtime routine that Sophia had established: bath, pajamas, story, sleep, but with both of us participating. Salvatore read from an Italian children's book, his deep voice taking on different characters with surprising skill. Luca nestled between us on his race car bed, fighting sleep even as his eyelids grew heavy. "Will you both be here when I wake up?" he mumbled as he drifted off. "Yes, Piccolo," Salvatore assured him, brushing a hand over his son's dark hair. "We'll both be here." Only when Luca's breathing had evened into the rhythm of deep sleep did we quietly leave the room, Salvatore adjusting the nightlight before gently closing the door. "He sleeps better when you're here?" he observed as we walked down the hallway. No nightmares. How do you know? The security system, Salvatore explained. It monitors for sounds of distress in his room. Last night was the first night in weeks he didn't wake up crying at least once. The revelation tugged at my heart. The nightmares are that frequent, Salvatore nodded, his expression grave. Since his mother left, they improved for a while, but after he got lost the other night. He trailed off, then changed direction. Would you join me for a drink? There are things we should discuss. He led me to his study, a masculine space of leather and dark wood, with bookshelves lining the walls and a large desk positioned to face the door. It was, I realized, a room designed for control, allowing its occupant to see anyone entering while offering multiple exit points. The security implications weren't lost on me. What would you like? Salvatore asked, moving to a well-stocked bar cart. Wine? Something stronger? Wine, please, I replied, taking a seat on one of the leather couches near a fireplace where low flames crackled. He poured 2 glasses of red wine, handing one to me before settling into the space beside me. Close but not touching, the heat of his body a tangible presence even across the distance. First, he began, I want to thank you for coming back, for giving Luca, and me, this chance. I came for Luca, I said, needing to establish that boundary. A knowing smile touched his lips. Only for Luca? I took a sip of wine instead of answering, which seemed to amuse him. You have questions, he stated rather than asked. About me, about what I do, about what I'm offering you. Yes. Ask them. I hesitated, organizing my thoughts. Luca mentioned that people might want to hurt him to get to you. Why? Salvatore's expression turned guarded. My businesses have competitors. Some are less ethical than others. What exactly are these businesses? I pressed. He studied me for a long moment. Import-export, primarily. Shipping, construction, real estate development, some financial services. Legitimate businesses? His eyes narrowed slightly. Most of them, yes. And the others? Do you really want to know, Emma? His voice had dropped lower, a dangerous edge creeping in. Once you know, you can't unknow. Ignorance offers a certain protection. The warning only strengthened my resolve. I need to know what I'm getting involved with, for Luca's sake, if nothing else. Salvatore set his wine glass down, then reached over to take mine and place it beside his. With deliberate movements, he shifted closer, one arm extending along the back of the couch behind me. My father came to this country with nothing, he began, his voice a low rumble. He built a life, a business, a reputation through sheer force of will. When he died, I inherited not just his assets, but his associations, his loyalties and his enemies, the Mafia, I whispered, giving voice to what I had suspected since that first night. He didn't confirm or deny it directly. I prefer to think of it as a family business with certain traditional values: loyalty, respect, protection. And violence? I challenged. His expression hardened. When necessary. This world isn't kind to those who won't defend what's theirs. A shiver ran through me, not entirely from fear. What happened to Luca's mother? I asked, changing direction. Pain flashed across Salvatore's features. Adriana couldn't handle this life, the security, the danger, the restrictions. She left when Luca was barely a year old, signed away all parental rights in exchange for enough money to disappear. Last I heard, she was in Europe somewhere, with a new name and a new life that doesn't include being a mother. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. You loved her. I thought I did, he admitted. But love without loyalty is meaningless. She betrayed not just me, but our son. That is unforgivable. His hand moved from the back of the couch to my shoulder, fingers tracing a light pattern that sent tingles down my spine. You're different, though. You put Luca's needs above your own from the moment you found him, a stranger's child, in the rain, with nothing to gain. It was the right thing to do, I said, my voice sounding breathier than I intended. The right thing, he repeated, his fingers now trailing along my collarbone. So rare in this world, so unexpected. I should have moved away, should have maintained the distance between us. but my body refused to obey the cautious whispers of my mind. Instead, I found myself leaning slightly into his touch. "What are you offering me, Salvatore?" I asked, needing clarity despite the growing fog of desire clouding my thoughts. Beyond this week, his amber eyes locked with mine, burning with an intensity that stole my breath. "Everything, Emma. A place in this house, in our lives. Security, luxury, a future without the constant struggle you've known. A role in raising Luca, who already adores you, and—" His hand moved to cup my cheek, thumb brushing across my lower lip. "My complete devotion." "You barely know me," I whispered against his thumb. "I know enough," he countered, echoing his words from the night before. "The rest, we have a lifetime to discover." "And what would I be to you? A nanny? A mistress?" I forced myself to ask the difficult questions despite the heat building between us. His jaw tightened at the last word. "You would be mine, Emma, in every way that matters. Not a mistress. Never that. In time, perhaps something more permanent, if that's what you wanted. But I won't pressure you. That decision would be yours, and if I wanted to keep working, to have my own life outside these walls—" A flash of possessiveness crossed his features. "We could discuss appropriate arrangements, safe environments, proper security. I protect what's mine, Emma, but I don't imprison it." I should have been offended at being referred to as a possession, but something primitive within me responded to his claim. In a world that had always treated me as disposable, being valued, even possessed, held a dark appeal. "And what about your other business?" I asked. "The parts that aren't legitimate, would I be involved in that?" "No," he said firmly. "That part of my life would remain separate from you and Luca. All I ask is that you accept it exists, that you don't question me about it, and that you trust me to keep you both safe from its consequences." It was an impossible request to accept without questioning, to trust blindly. Yet as I looked into his eyes, I found myself wanting to believe him. "I need time," I said finally. "The rest of the week, like we agreed." Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "Of course." His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair, but perhaps we could seal our temporary arrangement with something more tangible than words. The invitation was clear, his intent unmistakable as he leaned closer. I knew I should pull away, maintain boundaries until I was certain of my decision. Instead, I found myself meeting him halfway, drawn by a force that felt both foreign and inevitable. His lips met mine with surprising gentleness, a question rather than a demand. I answered by pressing closer, my hands finding their way to his chest, feeling the solid strength beneath fine fabric. The kiss deepened, his restraint giving way to a hungry intensity that matched the fire building inside me. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, his amber eyes had darkened to burnt gold. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured against my lips. The temptation was overwhelming. Every cell in my body screamed yes, while my mind flashed warning signs. "I can't," I whispered. "Not yet. Not until I'm sure about everything." Rather than anger, his expression showed respect, perhaps even admiration. "You continue to surprise me, Emma Sinclair." He pressed one more kiss to my lips, this one brief, but full of promise. "When you come to me, it will be because you've chosen this life completely. I can wait." The days that followed established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Mornings were spent with Luca, helping with his lessons, walking the grounds with Jupiter as our constant companion, learning about his interests and fears and dreams. Afternoons often found me alone while Luca napped or worked with his tutors, giving me time to explore the estate or simply read in the peaceful gardens. Evenings belonged to all three of us. Dinner, games, Luca's bedtime routine, followed by private moments with Salvatore that grew increasingly intimate without crossing the final boundary I had established. I learned more about them both with each passing day. Luca was brilliant, but lonely. Hungry for the kind of normal childhood experiences his father's position made impossible. Salvatore was complex, ruthless in business, fiercely protective of his son, surprisingly gentle with me. He never pressed for details about my decision. though I could feel the question in his gaze each night when we parted at my bedroom door. On the 6th day, everything changed. We were in the garden, Luca, Jupiter, and I, playing an elaborate game of hide-and-seek that had become our afternoon ritual. I had just found Luca behind a sculpted hedge when the sound of tires on gravel caught our attention. Not the usual sound of Salvatore's car returning, but multiple vehicles moving fast. Jupiter's demeanor transformed instantly from playful companion to alert guardian. He positioned himself between us and the front of the house, a low growl emanating from his massive chest. "Inside," I said to Luca, instinctively pulling him behind me. "We need to go inside now." Before we could move, Marco appeared, his usual composure replaced by urgent tension. "Miss Sinclair, take Luca to the safe room. Now, what's happening?" I asked, already guiding Luca toward the house. "We have unwanted visitors," Marco replied grimly. "Follow the protocol Mr. Russo established." Luca's face had gone pale, but he remained remarkably calm. "The bookshelves in Daddy's study," he told me. "There's a button behind the copy of Dante's Inferno." I nodded, impressed by his composure as I hurried him into the house. Jupiter followed, his massive body alert to every sound. Staff members were moving with purpose. Some carrying weapons I hadn't known were on the premises. We reached Salvatore's study, where Luca immediately went to a specific shelf and reached for a leather-bound volume. Behind it, just as he'd said, was a small button that revealed a hidden door in the wood paneling. The space beyond was essentially a fortified apartment, secure communications, surveillance monitors showing every angle of the property, provisions, even a small bathroom. "Daddy makes me practice coming here once a month," Luca explained as the door sealed automatically behind us in case bad people ever come. I guided him to a comfortable chair away from the monitors, not wanting him to see what might unfold. "Has this happened before?" "Once," he said quietly. "When I was 6. Some men tried to take me from my school. That's why I have tutors now." My heart clenched at the matter-of-fact way he described what must have been a terrifying experience. "Your father will handle this," I assured him, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "I know," Luca said, his faith absolute. "No one beats Daddy." We waited in tense silence, Jupiter lying protectively at Luca's feet, while I surreptitiously watched the security feeds. Men in dark suits, Salvatore's security team, had taken up defensive positions throughout the house. On one screen, I could see unfamiliar vehicles at the main gate. Black SUVs with tinted windows. Armed men surrounded them, engaged in what appeared to be a standoff with Salvatore's people. Time stretched endlessly. I kept Luca distracted with games and stories, all the while monitoring the situation through quick glances at the screens. After what felt like hours but was probably less than 45 minutes, the familiar shape of Salvatore's car appeared, speeding through a secondary entrance. Minutes later, the hidden door slid open to reveal Salvatore himself. His suit was impeccable as always, but there was a hardness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Cold, calculating rage barely contained beneath a veneer of control. "Daddy." Luca launched himself into his father's arms. Salvatore's expression softened immediately as he embraced his son, lifting him easily. "You're safe, Piccolo. Everything is fine now." Over Luca's shoulder, his eyes met mine, filled with emotions too complex to name. Relief, gratitude, and something darker that made my skin prickle with awareness. "Sophia is waiting to take you to your room," he told Luca, setting him down gently. "Why don't you go with her while I talk to Emma?" Luca hesitated, looking between us with surprising perception for an 8-year-old. "You're not mad at Emma, are you? She did everything right." "No, Piccolo, I'm not mad at Emma," Salvatore assured him. "Quite the opposite." Seemingly satisfied, Luca gave me a quick hug before leaving with Sophia, who had appeared in the doorway. Jupiter followed after receiving a command from Salvatore, though he seemed reluctant to leave my side. When we were alone, Salvatore closed the distance between us in 2 long strides, pulling me against him with desperate intensity. His lips found mine in a kiss that was all-consuming, relief and need and possession all mingled together. I responded with equal fervor, the adrenaline of fear transforming into a different kind of energy. "Are you all right?" he asked when we finally broke apart, his hands cradling my face. I'm fine, I assured him. Luca was so brave. He knew exactly what to do. Pride flashed across Salvatore's features. I've made sure of that. But you... His thumbs stroked my cheeks gently. You protected my son when I couldn't be here. There is no greater gift you could have given me. What happened? I asked. Who were those men? His expression darkened. Rivals. Testing boundaries. It's been handled. The cold finality in his voice told me not to press further. Will they come back? No, he said with absolute certainty. They won't. I didn't want to know what that meant. Some questions were better left unasked. Some truths better left unknown. You've seen now, Salvatore continued, his voice low and intense. The reality of this life, the danger that comes with it. I would understand if this changes your mind about staying. I thought about leaving, going back to my tiny apartment, my exhausting jobs, my lonely existence. Then I thought about Luca's face when he saw me each morning, about the safety I felt in Salvatore's arms despite the danger that surrounded his world. I'm not leaving, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words. Not unless you want me to. Something like wonder crossed his features. After today, most women would run. I'm not most women. No, he agreed, his amber eyes darkening with desire. You're not. His hand slid from my face to my shoulders, down my arms to capture my hands in his. Are you certain, Emma? Once you choose this life, once you choose me, there's no going back. I won't let you go. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it made me feel valued in a way I never had before. I'm certain. That night, I went to him willingly, crossing the final boundary between us. His lovemaking was like the man himself, controlled, yet passionate, demanding, yet giving, as we lay tangled together in the aftermath, his hands tracing patterns on my bare skin. I knew I had made both the most dangerous and most right decision of my life. The week turned into a month, then 6, then a year. Luca blossomed under our shared care, his nightmares fading as security and stability became his new normal. I found purpose in managing the legitimate side of Salvatore's enterprises, my business degree finally put to use in ways I could never have imagined. And Salvatore, he remained complex, dangerous to his enemies, fiercely protective of what was his. But with me, he showed a tenderness few would believe possible. On a snowy December evening, exactly 1 year after I had found a lost boy crying in the rain, Salvatore led me to the garden, where a path of candles illuminated the winter darkness. With Luca as our witness, he knelt in the snow and offered me not just a ring, but a promise of forever. You found my son, he said, amber eyes glowing in the candlelight. And in doing so, you found me, found us, completed us. As I said yes, with Luca cheering and Jupiter barking his approval, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. One act of kindness in the rain had changed everything, had given me a family, a purpose, a love both dangerous and profound. In Salvatore's world, debts must be paid, but sometimes what begins as obligation transforms into something far more powerful, more binding than any debt could ever be. Sometimes it becomes destiny.